Now, does it mean that all there is to it is this, right? Following some formulas, just like ancient Egyptians did, something that we've discussed a little bit earlier, right? If we, in some way, if we compare what was taking place back then and what is taking place at the moment in the industry, right? It's kinda the same stuff, right? The artists back then were taught to create specific, well, they were taught and told to create sculptures that looked very specifically. Obviously, there were exceptions. There were different periods where maybe the periods of disruption, periods of chaos, where new forms were taking place. But in general, when the structure was in place, right, when everything was holding in order, there were specific rules. What needs to be done and how it needs to be done. There were schools for that, right? So people were taught to create certain elements that should look the same everywhere, right? So the muscles here, the bones here, right? The muscles here, they all had to look more or less the same. And this is precisely what I was talking about in the previous lecture, that everything in here is done in more or less the same way, no matter what example we look, be it from video games, be it from film, it's looking more or less the same. Not necessarily because it's the way the human body looks, it's just that this is almost like a standard that nobody is talking about out loudly, but it really is a standard, right? It's a pattern. But we should not be kind of delusional about where things are going, right? We shouldn't be ignoring the technology that is penetrating the industry, and a technology that has been used in the industry for for quite a bit of time now, for 10 years, maybe more, maybe less, but let's say 10 years. And I'm talking about 3D scans. Now, something that I've mentioned, that if we look at the progress, it's not just about the fact that the tech is getting so strong that we can reproduce something like this in video games or in film, right? It's not about the amount of polygons. It's a tendency to recapture reality as close as possible. I will not discuss this in this lecture, why it's taking place, but let's just say that it does, because no matter where we look, in the industries where we are seeing this pattern, we're seeing this direction, right? We can see the vector of where things are going, and things are going definitely in this direction, right? Hyper realism, and that's why the scans are being utilized first. Perhaps they were made, they were utilized for the faces, for capturing the morph targets, the animation, right? But now it's being used for bodies, it's being used for clothing, it's being used for just full characters, because in some way, if the technology is within the reach of the company, it's accessible, right, to the company, it's much easier, and obviously it depends on the kind of project that the company is making, but it's much easier and in some way cheaper to use scan data than to create every single character from scratch, right? If we take an example of let's say there is a war game, and there's a lot of characters on the screen, and they all have some variation to them, right? It might be easier to go to a museum or go to a theater studio or whatever the place might be, where the clothing can be taken from that period, right? Dress people up, scan them, and then you have it, right? You just need to create a low poly model on top of that, which can also be animated at this point, and you will get the model, you will get the texture, and it's going to be the most realistic looking model or asset that you can find, right? So in this sense, it's very convenient. It's very not just convenient, it's very efficient. On the other hand, the scanning has some limitations, because you sometimes, not you, but sometimes what is required is not a one-to-one resemblance of the person, right, who is being scanned, but it's more about maybe proportions, it's more about capturing the physique, it's more about capturing the emotions, right, and then the model itself, the character, be it in the video games or in film. So for example, previous slide was with Thanos from Avengers. That was the actor was hidden by the 3D model, right? But there's some resemblance in there. So Last of Us, the second one, that would be another example. So obviously we don't want a copy of the person who we are scanning, right? We want to have some degree of creativity in here to match the vision of the creative director who has this character envisioned in their head. And scan data doesn't really allow for such a thing to do. It still requires some manual work, right? It requires a person to sit and model, sculpt, create the character. But this is, in my opinion, this is a almost like a dying process. It's definitely something is missing in here. In the whole process, something is amiss, because there is too much automatization already taking place, right? And there is the amount of work that is taking place afterwards by an artist who is doing everything afterwards manually. It just doesn't match, and I know it's almost kind of ambiguous to speak about it this way, but I do believe that this is going to change, and I think what's going to happen is going to be a tool that will be simplified to the point where it will be just sliders. And I'm at this point I'm talking about almost Metahuman. If you enjoy this content or find it useful, please consider supporting me by buying me a cup of coffee via the link in the description. So Metahuman, this is a experiment that I did. This is recognizable. This is supposed to be Lex Friedman. He's a podcaster, quite a famous one. Don't ask. It was a project. I still have it. I still might finish it. But the interesting thing about it is that I had an idea for Metahuman maybe 10 years ago, and it's interesting even more that I thought that the company that would make a tool similar to what Metahuman is would be Epic Games. I don't know why, I don't know how, but it was very clear in my mind that something like this is going to happen, right? And it's very specific that I thought that it would be Epic who would make such a tool. The thing though with Metahuman, when it came about and when I started to play with it, and I don't remember if it's changed or not, because it's been maybe 2 years since I experimented here. It's interesting to me that at first it was more about kind of creating the character using the sliders, but the patterns that were within the system of Metahuman was utilizing models that were created by artists at Epic Games, right? And to me, that didn't make any sense whatsoever. And the reason for it is because if the industry is going in this direction, and clearly it does, and at that point, Epic even had the mega scans, right? They bought the company, or they bought all the assets, so the photorealistic assets for environment. And when I saw Metahuman, I was thinking, well, why didn't they go a step further, right? It just would make sense. I mean, from the beginning, my idea about this kind of application was that you would use 3D scans, right? You would make a face, you would make a real character not based on a work that was done by another artist, but you would make this character based on a real person, right, on a real scan data. So in my view, it was just gathering a whole bunch of like an archive of scan data, and then you come and you play with the sliders. I don't know if this is happening, if something like this is being done now. Regardless of the way it's being done, it's nonetheless unbelievably impressive that we get to see this kind of a tool available to everybody, right? This is all free of charge, and we can make our own characters. We can even try and make some resemblance to the real person, right? Just like with every other technology that is out there, that is now almost like a standard, this is not yet something that is used inside the industry. At least I'm not aware of that. Maybe it is. Maybe some companies are using that to some extent, at least, right? But just like with ZBrush, just like with Marvelous Designer, there's going to be not just resistance, but there is not enough flexibility within this tool at the moment, right? There's something is still lacking, but the fact that it's here, it's already here, means that it's only going to get better, right? It's only going to be improving. And so the question then arises for every character artist out there, well, what's going to be the job of the character artist? If we can produce something like this, I mean, to the limitations, or with the limitations that we do have at the moment, if we can do this by good lord, I didn't realize you can change the body types to that point. Well, there are some restrictions, but apparently so if we can produce characters using just sliders, the question arises: do we need to know anything? What's the expectation of the character artist of the future, right? So again, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, who knows? But something like this will definitely take place. Something like this will happen, right? So we need to think about it in some way, and maybe even prepare ourselves. And I would argue that to use those kind of tools better, and I mean, Metahuman is just the beginning, right? There's going to be more done with artificial intelligence. There's going to be the kind of tools that I'm not even capable of imagining at the moment, right? But it's going to be something spectacular. It's going to be something unbelievably powerful. And I would argue for those kind of tools, when they do arrive, and we're already witnessing the arrival of those tools, I would argue that exactly because of that, we need to be as knowledgeable as we can be about the subject matter that we're creating, right? And in this case, this is where for the kind of knowledge of anatomy comes in, when you can name the muscles, you know where the muscle connects, because if you do know that, you can be incredibly specific about the way the character is looking. And by doing that, you will be able to create something that is not just a standard like we have here, even though we can play with the sliders, right? And to some extent, everybody will be able to create a unique character, but it still utilizes sliders, so there is still some limitation. But if you can bypass this limitation by your knowledge, by being able to specifically say what exactly that you need, maybe you want to have some kind of not just asymmetry in the character, right? But maybe you want something that really stands out, really sticks out, maybe some kind of a mutation taking place inside of the body, right? It's all of a sudden now it becomes not about the tool, not about necessarily the sliders. It's becoming about your imagination, the exact thing that you wanted to create, but for that you need to be able to express it using the language, right? So this is how artificial intelligence, at least at the moment, is behaving, right? You specify things, you need to be incredibly precise about what you want to make. And so for that, anatomy, knowledge of anatomy, studying anatomy, books about anatomy, the courses, the workshops for anatomy, that's when it's going to come in.